Welcome everyone to our May 28th Zoom satsang. Wonderful to be with you today. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Today we are continuing the presentation entitled The Stages of Unfoldment in Śaiva Siddhanta. The next section is entitled Charya Pada. Charya Pada, stage of good conduct, is the first stage of religiousness and the foundation for the next three stages. It's also called the dasa marga, meaning path of servitude, for here the soul relates to God as servant to master. So remember, the marga shows the relationship of the soul to God. The patavi, attainment, is salokya, sharing the world of God. Charya is most commonly described as acts of service done at the temple. However, it also gives general guidelines for conduct. Mantram gives such a guideline in verse 1444, in stating that adoration that displaces anger is Charya worship. Se yitkadai nesa shivapusayame. Savaratnam Shivacharya elaborates on this line. The worship of Shiva pertaining to the Charya path is to be with pure and spontaneous love, which wards off anger, lust, and other such vices, and which renders fitness to the devotees to do services without expecting any benefit or reward. Gurudeva's unique contribution to practicing Charya is to include the 10 yamas as a core practice. In other words, getting control of the instinctive mind, such as the tendency to become angry and hurtful. The evolution of the soul through the stage of Charya or service may itself take many, many lifetimes. We see people every day who are working to be of service, to be more efficient, to be more useful to others. They are not necessarily inclined toward devotion, yet they may be deeply concerned with humanitarian programs, with selflessly helping their fellow man. An entire life may be spent in Charya, and the next life and the next. It is a slow process with its own timing. Not every stage of experience can be accepted at once. The path of Charya begins with the avoidance of wrongful action and can be likened to the early training of a child, in which he is told, don't do this instead. Don't behave in that way, this is the proper behavior. In early life, a child learns what is right by being told what not to do. In spiritual life, too, we have these avoidances, these restraints. In all, as we know, there are 10 classical restraints called yamas, which are non-injury, truthfulness, non-stealing, sexual purity, patience, steadfastness, compassion, honesty, moderate appetite, and purity. The yamas give him guidelines that stabilize him in the beginning, controlling the instinctive mind. These inner reins help him to know what is right, help him to control his karma and educate his intellect by laying a foundation of quiet within the instinctive mind, a foundation upon which the intellect may build a knowledgeable structure. In other words, if someone's not following the yamas, their life is not that smooth, and their mind is always upset. Therefore, you can't really do advanced practices with that going on. You have to smooth out your life, quiet your mind through restraining the instinctive mind. Charya is a state of overcoming basic instinctive patterns and learning to work for the sake of work rather than the fruits of our labor, which has the magical effect of softening the ego and bringing the soul's innate devotion, and bringing forth the soul's innate devotion. It is the simple fulfillment of right action and the first step on the spiritual path in our religion. Our duty to our parents, to our community, to the wife and children, to the temple and the town or village, honoring holy men and respecting elders, all this must be fulfilled for Charya to be perfected. Work for the sake of work rather than for the fruits of our labor is commonly referred to by its Sanskrit term, nishkama karma. The attitude of non-expectation of fruits of action is called nishkama bhava. In other words, we are doing an action because we feel it is the right thing to do. We are not seeking praise for doing it or any type of reward or benefit. This practice is what lessens the sense of ego we start with when taking up the Charya Pada. One goes to the temple at this stage of unfoldment because it is expected of him. He goes there not to practice yoga, not to evolve a personal relationship with the deity, but because he must. It is his duty. His instinctive mind at this stage of his evolution is so strong that it must be governed firmly by external laws, external forces. He either obeys or suffers the consequences of disobedience. It is his fear of the consequences that motivates him more than anything else. Certainly he may feel guilty or fearful when he approaches the temple, for he is aware of his own transgressions and omissions. But little by little he gains confidence and understanding. His conscience begins to take the place of outer sanctions and gradually becomes his guideline. Whereas before he never felt guilty even for his worst transgressions. Now he begins to feel remorse for misdeeds. Tendencies toward selfishness lose their hold on the devotee as he strives to become the perfect servant to God and mankind. The sequential pattern of evolution is experienced by each individual in a microcosmic sense in each lifetime. Even if they have been experienced in a previous life, the lessons contained in each stage are, in a sense, relearned in childhood. If we have previously learned them, then they will be quickly mastered. But if we have not learned these lessons in another life, we draw to ourselves in this life the experiences that we need to do so. This knowledge is an inheritance that comes along with the physical body. In other words, experience from other lives affect the patterns of experience in this life. With basic inherited knowledge, the soul develops an intellectual mind through the good graces of its own personal karma and destiny. Provided his intellectual mind is in accordance and in harmony with the precepts of his religion. If not, he has problems. Those problems can be overcome, but they are problems while they are being overcome. If his beliefs are not in harmony with his religion, that conflict can stagnate and congest his natural advancement and must be resolved before he can move on to the second stage. In the stage of Charya, similar to karma yoga, the devotee naturally awakens a desire to work for the sake of work, to serve for the sake of service. He does this in his daily life and through helping in the temple in practical ways, through sweeping the marble floors, polishing the brass lamps, weaving fragrant garlands for the pujas, helping other devotees in their lives, and in general through a humble and unseen kind of service. This humble service is itself a means to break the stagnant congestion of erroneous beliefs. That's a beautiful sentence. Read it again. This humble service is itself a means to break the stagnant congestion of erroneous beliefs. Worship during the Charya stage is entirely external, yet it is entirely meaningful to the devotee. In Charya, the devotee looks upon the stone image in the temple, sanctum, with his physical eyes, and to him darshan of the deity is the physical sight of the stone image of God. The Charya Pada has 4 subdivisions. Charya and Charya consists of personal service in the temple. Specific activities listed in Scripture include lighting the lamps, picking flowers, making garlands, sweeping, washing, polishing the floors, singing the Lord's praise, ringing the bell, and fetching ceremonial water. Kriya and Charya consists of attending the Parartha Puja, and per the guidelines of the Agamas of one's Guru, offering worship to the Murti of any of the 25 forms of Shiva. If not the form of Shiva, he may worship Ganapati or Skanda. Yoga and Charya consists of meditation after the Parartha Puja worship is complete. Jnana and Charya is the experiential knowledge gained by these practices. Anubhava Unarchi. So that's experiencing something of an intuitive or superconscious nature, which can happen through Charya and Charya, Kriya and Charya, or Yoga and Charya. Any of those 3 practices could generate experiential knowledge. Gurudeva gives a profound and detailed explanation of Yoga and Charya and Jnana and Charya emerging with Shiva, chapter 21, Total Surrender, which is definitely unique. Gurudeva, to internalize worship after the puja is over, sit before the deity and draw into yourself all the pranas you feel around your body, then draw those energies up the spine and to the head. This is done with the mind and with the breath. It is very easy to do. It is especially easy when one is at the end of a major karmic cycle. The bhakti of uncompromising surrender, prapati, to the God during a temple puja awakens the amrita. The amrita is the sweet essence from the Saraswara chakra. It is the binding yoke to the divine. Bind yourself in the lotus posture after temple worship and simply internalize all the feeling that you had for the God during the worship. That's all there is to it. The yogi yoked within enjoys the amrita that flows from the cranium throughout his body. Devotees who want to awaken the higher chakras and sustain that awakening on the safe path will throw themselves into becoming uncompromising bhaktars. Then all the gods of all 3 worlds will open their hearts and shower their blessings upon them. Gurudeva gives this unique statement about the jnana stage of the 4 padas. The first sadhana, therefore, is to always hold the overview and cling in your memory to the intuitive flashes that come as a result of your practices. These intuitive flashes come from deep within and are the only thing that should be remembered. For this is your jnana, your insightfulness, your own wisdom breaking through. And we have 3 quotes from Yoga Swami on this idea of finding the knowledge within you. The book is within you. Turn over the leaves and study. It must come from within. Don't rely on book knowledge. Trust the self alone. Don't read books. It is in you. Finishing the Charya section with a quote from Tirumandaram, 1502. To do the simple service of placing the lighted lamps to collect the flowers from the trees and plants, to coat the ground with cow dung, being with softened heart, to sweep the floor gently, to praise the Lord, to ring the bells fixed in the temple, to arrange for various kinds of ceremonial bath for the Lord. Performance of such deeds related to the temple is the characteristic of dasa marga. So Charya Pada and dasa marga are the same thing. It's just two different terms for the same thing. And a review of Charya. Charya Pada, stage of good conduct. Dasa marga, path of servitude, or way of servitude. Soul relates to God as servant to his master. Salokya patavi, sharing the world of God. And the next section, Kriya Pada. Saivism demands deep devotion through bhakti yoga in the Kriya Pada, softening the intellect and unfolding love. In the Kriya Pada, religious action or worship stage, or sadhana, which was mostly external in Charya, is now also internal. Our relationship with God in Kriya is as a son to his parents, and thus this stage is called the satputra marga, true son's way. The patavi, attainment, is samipya, nearness to God. So we were quite a distance in the dasa marga. It's like the servant is downstairs and never goes upstairs, and the master's upstairs. We know the master's there, we never see him. So this is getting nearer. It's like we're going upstairs. Kriya, literally action or rite, is a stirring of the soul in awareness of the divine. Overcome the obstinacy of the instinctive intellectual mind. The devotee will naturally want to worship and serve in the temple in more internalized ways. He will seek to understand why a stone image is a stone image, why stone images are needed at all. He will begin to think about the purpose of worship, the meaning of worship, the experience of worship. He will wonder to himself about the ancient customs and protocol and why these customs are followed in his community. He will delve into the scriptures, learning and studying about his religion, absorbing and intuiting their wisdom. Singing the sacred hymns, chanting the names of the Lord, and performing japa will become an important part of his devotion. He performs pilgrimage and fulfills the sacraments. Gurudeva's unique contribution to practicing Kriya is to include the 10 niyamas as a core practice. And they are remorse, contentment, giving, faith, worship of the Lord, scriptural listening, cognition, sacred vows, recitation, austerity. Singing the sacred hymns, chanting the names of the Lord, and performing japa will become an important part of his devotion. Devotion will well up from the recesses of his soul as he purifies himself. His heart begins to open as he evolves out of the instinctive mind into a spiritualized intellect, an intellect that is developed from within himself. His instinctive nature is subsiding and his intellectual nature is emerging as he comes into a full understanding of the laws of karma. As his intellect controls the instinctive mind, he understands for the first time the cause and effect, the action and reaction of his physical and mental activities. Kriya blossoms into its fullness when there arises in his heart a strong desire to know and experience God, to penetrate into the realms of consciousness and reality beyond the physical plane, revealed by his grosser senses. He expresses this desire through continued worship in the very special environment of the Hindu temple or his home shrine. He worships the personal aspect of God, and his attitude is no longer one of fear or of a servant to a master, as it was in Charya and Kriya. He looks upon God as a dutiful son to his father. He perceives that God is his personal Lord, concerned for the welfare of mankind, and he approaches God in a human, personal way. He wants to serve God not because he fears the consequences of being an infidel, but because he wants to be in harmony with a higher reality which he reveres, to be attuned to the darshan of the deity. One of Gurudeva's unique contributions to practicing the Kriya Pada is to turn your entire house into God's house. The ideal of Ishvara Pujana worship is to be always living with God, living with Shiva in God's house, which is also your house, and regularly going to God's temple. This lays the foundation for finding God within. How can someone find God within if he doesn't live in God's house as a companion to God in his daily life? The answer is obvious. It would only be a theoretical pretense, based mainly on egoism. If one really believes that God is in his house, what kinds of attitudes does this create? This is a nice looking meal here. Tali. First of all, since family life is based around food, the family would feed God in his own room at least 3 times a day. Place the food lovingly before his picture, leave, close the door, and let God and his devas eat in peace. God and the devas do enjoy the food, but they do so by absorbing the pranas, the energies of the food. When the meal is over, and after the family is eaten, God's plates are picked up too. What is left on God's plate is eaten as prasada, as a blessing. God should be served as much as the hungriest member of the family, not just a token amount. Of course, gods and the devas do not always remain in the shrine room. They wander freely throughout the house, listening to and observing the entire family, guests and friends. Since the family is living in God's house and God is not living in their house, the voice of God is easily heard as their conscience. For those in Kriya, darshan is not only the physical side of the stone image in the temple, it is also an inner communion, a receiving of the blessings and the messages and the rays of second and third well-beings who are actual conscious entities and whose consciousness is canalized through the sacred image by esoteric temple practices. This is a deeper perception of the darshan of the deity. A unique insight from Gurudeva related to darshan is receiving messages from the deity. To understand darshan, consider the everyday and yet subtle communication of language. You are hearing the tones of my voice through the sensitive organ, your ear. Meaning comes into your mind, for you have been trained to translate these vibrations into meaning through the knowledge of the language that I am speaking. Darshan is a vibration too. It is first experienced in the simple physical glimpse of the form of the deity and the sanctum. Later, that physical sight gives way to a clairvoyant vision, or to refined cognition, received through the sensitive ganglia within your nerve system, the chakras. Through these receptors, a subtle message is received, often not consciously, perhaps not immediately, but the message that the darshan carries direct from the Mahadeva, direct from Lord Ganesha, direct from Lord Marga, direct from Lord Shiva himself, manifests in your life. This is the way the gods converse. It is a communication more real than the communication of language that you experience each day. It is not necessary to understand the communication immediately. The devotee may go away from the temple outwardly feeling that there was no particular message, or not knowing in his intellectual mind exactly what the darshan meant. Even the words you are now reading may not be fully cognized for days, weeks, or even months. The depth of meaning will unfold itself on reflection. Other forms of religious expression naturally come forth from the devotee in the stage of unfoldment, such as attending pujas regularly, chanting, undertaking pilgrimages to temples and holy places, and studying the scriptures. Midpoint in this stage of development of the soul, the devotee may psychically experience an aspect of God that has been worshiping in the temple, that he has been worshiping in the temple. You may see the deity in a dream or have a vision of him during a quiet period when he is sitting with his eyes closed after puja. After this experience, he centers his life fully around God and learns to psychically attune himself to his darshan, his will. Once he fully understands his religion, if he has sufficient means, he may express his eagerness to serve through building a temple or participation in such a project. Indeed, this is the great culmination of Kriya. Through the devotees in the Kriya or Bhakti Yoga stage of their unfoldment that we have all over the world today, magnificent Hindu temples built by people who have performed well, who have controlled their thoughts and actions, who have understood the laws of karma and the penalties of wrong action. They have avoided wrong action not out of fear, but because they have evolved into performing right action. Having released themselves from the dense fog of the instinctive mind, they can now build temples of great beauty, which reflect the beauties they have discovered within themselves in their personal communion with God, who to them is not an awesome master who might punish and discipline, but a loving Father. As he matures in Kriya, the devotee unfolds a more and more intense love of God, to the point that he may well shed joyful tears during intense moments of worship. When that love is constant from day to day, when it is strong enough that he is capable of surrendering his individual will to God's cosmic will, then Kriya or Bhakti Yoga has reached its zenith. This giving up of his own will is a slow process in which he unwinds the last remaining strands of his external will from the instinctive mind. His will was born of intellectual concepts, and these concepts, too, he releases unto God, feeling within his inmost being that he knows little of the grand mysteries of existence. An admission he could not make earlier. He realizes that he receives his inspiration, his energy, his very life from God. At this stage of Kriya, the devotee learns patience. He learns to wait for the proper timing of things in his life. He is in no hurry. He is willing to wait for another life, or for many more lives. There is no urgency. He trusts God and trusts the path he is on. He settles down and his life comes into a balance. He observes that he is in an evolutionary process, along with thousands and millions of others. He embraces other devotees with renewed love and appreciation. He patterns his life in such a way that the temple is the hub of his culture, his religious activity and observance. his very thinking. From the temple or its own shrine, he goes forth to spend his days in the world. And to the temple or shrine, he returns from the world. His life comes and goes from that sacred place. The Kriya Pada also has 4 subdivisions. Charya and Kriya, cleaning the shrine room and collecting all the necessary substances and implements needed for the daily worship of Shiva Linga. Kriya and Kriya, performing Atmartha Puja to Shiva in the form of Shiva Linga as prescribed in the Agamas, with the preliminary 5 purifications after receiving initiation into that worship. Yoga and Kriya, meditation after performing Atmartha Puja. Jnana and Kriya, the experiential knowledge gained by these practices. Anubhava Unarchi. Finishing this Kriya section with 2 verses from Tirumandaram. Performing the worship, systematic study of the scriptures, praising the Lord, repeating the mantras, observing pure and good austerities, to be truthful, to be free from impurities, preparing the rice offering. These and the purification of oneself are the disciplines of faultless satputra marga. Next verse. Being wholly under the possession of love, I would stand before the Lord with a melting heart. Every day I would offer the services needed for the Lord and the devotees, standing before the lotus feet of the Lord, whose form appears to have been made of pure and high-quality gold. I would supplicate, kindly bestow your grace on me. At this stage, Shiva entered my body, filling it up with light up to the pores of my bones. Nice experience. And a review of Kriya Pada. Kriya Pada, religious action or worship stage. Saputra Marga, true son's way. Soul relates to God as a son to his father. Samipya Patavi, nearness to God. Thank you very much. Oh.